Charleston County Sheriff Kristin Graziano says she's making some big changes at the Charleston County Detention Center following the death of Jamal Sutherland in January. Today, I talk in depth with the sheriff for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Charleston County Sheriff Kristin Graziano, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. Thank you again for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I know that you have been extremely busy lately, and obviously, and unfortunately, you have been under the microscope from really January up until right now. And I know that you campaign on transparency, Sheriff, within the jail prior to this. Why should we believe you right now?
Why shouldn't you, Quintin? I've heard this criticism, and I'm going to come out swinging because I've heard this criticism from so many people about transparency, but yet through it all, Quintin, I'm the only one that's been open and honest, and I'm the only one doing anything, and I'm not just running my mouth. I'm not pointing fingers at people for things that didn't go well. I'm taking responsibility for the things that I can take responsibility for, but more than that, Quintin, I'm changing direction, and I'm fixing those inadequacies. And I think it's short-sighted of people to say that there's been a lack of transparency when it's not been nothing but.
What direction are you heading into right now when it comes to the detention center?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. And if you haven't been paying attention, let me fill you in. So, the first day that I took office, we had that tragedy happen with Mr. Sutherland. That's not the only tragedy that has happened in Charleston County since January 5th. Okay, a lot has gone on in Charleston County since January 5th. This has just been a focus for the media, but there's been a lot going on. So in the detention center itself, and I'm sure you've read the reports, both Rainey and the solicitor's report, as well as ours, that there were some serious inadequacies in the detention center when it came to training of our own personnel. It's not their fault that they train that way. It was just the system that was in place that they were set up to train under the former administrator. So that system is no longer in existence. I knew this during my campaign. I campaigned on this. I knew that there were serious problems. And then when I went into transition mode from the day after the election, we went into transition mode. We started working on just the detention center. It's not like we didn't know that this was a hot button and there was a tragedy waiting to happen. We needed to get in there and do the things that we needed to do to keep people safe. We knew that in transition. We knew that prior to the swearing in, and it just so happens the stars aligned that day and a tragedy occurred. And my only regret, Quintin, is that I wasn't in there sooner to stop to prevent that tragedy.
What did you learn about the detention center more during your transition, specifically about training?
So the training we already knew was a problem, and it was specifically for this, that dozen or so people that were trained to do tactics for violent people or people that are just non-compliant in the jail setting. Some people refer to it as a SWAT team for the jail. I don't think that's the case at all. I think this is a very specific group of folks that are skilled or trained to use weapons and tactics to keep people safe. That's the goal, right? It's not to go hurt people. However, what we found in the training that they had, it was based on fear and intimidation. And that's not how we train. The rest of the country, Quintin, is saying de-escalate, de-escalate, de-escalate. We've been doing that for years, but the detention center didn't get that memo. And instead, they referred to tactics that they had been trained to do by a third party who was not even qualified to do any training. And for 11 years, they went through that training. That person was a part of the system. So I'm going in there now trying to undo this. So day one, during our transition, our very first meeting with my staff, my transition staff, who were members of the agency, was to stop this practice, stop those practices, and to go in to make sure that we're allowing people to not do the things that they've been trained to do, but everyone needs to stay safe. Well, I can only do so much in transition when you're not getting total cooperation from the former staff. I was actually onboarding a new trainer for that team And that had started, we were almost partially into that process about 2 weeks when the former assistant sheriff told the person to stop, that they weren't, he wasn't going to approve it. And I didn't need his permission, but that's the kind of things that's the kind of the roadblocks that we hit, the walls that we hit. So it took me a little longer to get them in. I still got them in quicker than I normally would have if I had to wait till January, but so it took a little longer, but we still got him in there. And he has completely turned that group, that training around. It's now in compliance with standards and principles in the state. It's now in compliance with policy. It wasn't before. It was contradicting policy. So that's just one of the things. The other things, I mean, I can name a list of them, but when you find that there's a problem or a inadequacy in the procedures that you have to change them. The immediate procedure that was changed was the bond hearing procedure. No longer do people have to refuse, but they can refuse bond hearing by law. They can do that, but they don't have to be in front of a judge. And if a judge requests to see them, we can bring a tablet right to their cell. That didn't happen overnight, Quintin. We didn't have the infrastructure in place to make that happen, but within a couple weeks, that was done. And so now we have the infrastructure, the technology in place to leave people where they are and bring the hearings to them. That's what technology has allowed us to do. In addition to that, we have an automatic flagging system for people, not just with mental health history, but also substance abuse. Because in January, things that are overseen, once again, people hear what they want to hear. 4 saves in our detention center using Narcan in January, in a couple weeks in January, for people that came in crisis. That crisis could have been a combination of mental health, but it appeared to be drug initiated. 4 saves in January alone, right there, either in our Sally Port or in the detention center on intake.
And let me ask you this: who was that third-party provider as far as training?
So his name was Joseph Garcia. He runs a company, has many shell companies under that name, US SOG, S-O-G. There are also about 11, I think we counted 11 other shell companies that he operates. All the phone numbers for him are international numbers. He lives in Spartanburg. Maybe he did at one point. I think he's in Virginia now. He has since been arrested by the U.S. Marshals. He's being sued by several agencies, to include Rikers Island, where he did training for them as well. So there's a history, there's a pattern. This lawsuit, the latest lawsuit, was going on while he was training our own people. It's just infuriating to me that this keeps getting overlooked. And I agree with people with disability. I absolutely think it's much higher than that.
Let me ask you this, okay? Will Charleston County Sheriff's Office file a lawsuit against this fella?
So, Quintin, that is my goal. It is personally my mission to figure out how we can do that. Right now, we're just scratching the surface. We're finding things that are very disturbing. Scarlett reflected in her report that there was a delay in getting information. Let me be very clear. There was no delay on our part to get information she needed to do her investigation. What she is referring to, the additional gigabytes that was sent to her, was duplicative of what we'd already sent. However, there were some new items that we accidentally found, and we found those by going through videos, just body cam videos, not anything labeled, anything specific related to training. But a supervisor had retired, and he was going through all his videos, and he found one that, and I think it's referenced. That's the one that's referenced. That's only one that was referenced in her report, and it was with Fickett and another person spraying each other. I don't know if you had a chance to watch that. And they used up like 23 cans of pepper spray on each other, and it was a hazing. It was but that was the that was part of the training that they went through with this third party trainer. That by the way, they were not allowed to record any of their trainings. They weren't allowed to document any of their trainings. So we knew going in we had nothing. These particular videos were snuck by staff on body cam that were participating in the training, and they probably either didn't know that they had been automatically downloaded, because we have a system that automatically downloads, or they thought it was put on another computer that contained some of that training video that had been deleted. So we found these by accident. It was completely by accident. When that captain found that one video, we did a deep dive into all the videos. It's thousands of body cam videos, and we were able to find at least one more that dealt with the training, but it was not meant to be found, and it was just by luck.
And I know, according to United States Congressman Nancy Mace, you stated that you did not recall when you watched the video for the first time of Mr. Sutherland. Recently, United States Congressman Nancy Mace said on Twitter a few months back that it was 1 or 2 days later after it was released. When were you able to find these videos?
I don't know when I watched the videos, Quintin, and I'm not gonna play games with Nancy Mace's language. She hears what she wants to hear. The insurrection was going on, and she was in the bottom of the Capitol when all this was going on the day after. So, here we are. The insurrection is happening. We're trying to deal with that. We're trying to deal with what had happened, wrap our heads around what happened at the detention center. Because in all honesty, when I got that call that somebody had died, Quintin, I said, "Oh my gosh, it's another overdose." I know this is a problem, but I figured it was another overdose because we had so many overdoses over there at the detention center, and our job is to save lives, not to take them. So I thought that's what I was going to, somebody with another overdose. And it was, after I got there and found out the circumstances and found out force was used, that I called SLED in right away. There was no delay in anything. The videos went straight to SLED. I wasn't privy to all that right away because I wanted an independent investigation. So shame on her for assuming that she knows more than actually happened that day, when she's in fear of her own life, and she's texting everybody and telling them that.
And I know the solicitor says, quote, "I can't prove that the officers or the deputies in this case committed a crime." What did the deputies, that is, commit in your mind?
So what they did do, Quintin, is they didn't stop. They didn't stop, and they had the opportunity to stop. And I said earlier that their training was in conflict with policy. You can't have it both ways. You just can't. And I understand that there's a lot of controversy over that. But when you're training, you're told that this is the way you need to do things, and then your policy dictates something completely different. But you've been told by the training you went through something different. It's very confusing. What I have to go back to is my training and my experience in the field. I've never worked in a jail. When something doesn't feel right, I still have the right to stop, and I have the right to stop the action that's going on. And that's my biggest frustration, that they just didn't stop and regroup and say, this isn't working.
Did you see involuntary manslaughter on that video?
I didn't see any malice or any intent to do anybody harm like that. I really didn't. I saw 2 people that were fighting somebody that was combative, and they just put themselves in a really bad situation. Tactically, they put themselves in a bad situation. Again, they had the ability to pull out. These 2 people didn't have in their minds that they want to hurt somebody or kill somebody. They wanted to secure this person so nobody got hurt, and that it didn't work out. And it was a combination of things, Quintin, and it's just a tragedy the way it happened. But no, I don't see any malice on their part as far as wanting to do harm to somebody. That's not what their intent was.
With a high-profile case like the Jamal Sutherland case, did you ever speak to the governor, or did the governor speak to you?
I did not personally speak to the governor. No, but my attorney during our mediation was in conversations with his office.
Did the governor ask you not to release the tape?
Quintin, I'm not going to. I didn't speak to the governor. Again, my My legal counsel at the time was in conversations with that office, as was the county's legal counsel, and there were conversations that urged that tape be withheld, and I was not going to do that because I had already, um, I had signed an agreement with the family, and at the conclusion of that mediation, I was going to honor that agreement.
Now, who is your legal representation now?
Our case is over, so I don't have. It was somebody that was pointed through the insurance reserve fund. So I don't. I don't. This is not an ongoing case for us.
Did any of the any of the deputies, I should say, Sheriff Graziano, did any of those deputies present know that Jamal was actually a mental health patient?
If they didn't, they should have, Quintin.
If we know that police are not equipped to handle situations involving the mentally ill, then why was Mr. Sutherland actually sent to you all?
Tomorrow I'm hosting a mental health summit, and we're going to talk about all of these options that are available to law enforcement. There are options available to us. Mental health is probably one of the probably biggest organizations that has suffered from in terms of budget cuts throughout the country, and it's not just Charleston County. So their resources have been cut. Ours have been cut. We may not be equipped to handle extreme cases long term, but we're trained to deal with people that are in crisis until the help arrives that we need. So there are resources available to us. I know that I could tell you that particular day, that particular night, the Crisis Stabilization Center was not even open. We were still in COVID protocol.
Yeah.
They didn't open for a couple more weeks after that, after this event. And I'm not so sure that he would have been eligible to go there because he was being combative. But you do hear the officers questioning the staff at the hospital. Is this guy under a court order? Do I have a right to take him? And they're asking all the right questions, and the staff, the hospital, still saying, no, we want him out. Take him, take him, take him. And when you don't have other alternatives available to you, they did have the ER obviously available to them, the emergency room. But the ER, they would have done the same thing, taken them to the ER, stabilize them, send them right back to either a hospital or send them home. Still a better option. Jail, unfortunately, has been the easiest answer for law enforcement, and it's just been it's been abused, and that's something that we'll talk about tomorrow. Because while we don't have all the resources available to us, we do have a great staff, an incredibly dedicated staff at the detention center, and they're all doing the work. Both mental health, DAODIS, our staff, and everyone that's there are doing the work that they can with what they have. And I think that unfortunately sometimes gets overshadowed by tragedy. But out of this tragedy, we can only hope. I'm taking responsibility for what I can, Quintin. And out of this, I don't want another family to go through what the Sutherlands went through. I don't want our community to go through what they went through with this tragedy. So where we go from here is very important. And I think that's the purpose of tomorrow's summit, is to put the people that make the decisions on funding, make the decisions on law in the room together and figure this out.
Why doesn't, for lack of a better word, DHEC or any other mental health agencies have staff inside your detention center?
We do, Quintin.
Okay.
We do have staff. Yeah, we do have a great amount of resources inside. Our medical provider, WellPath, only has one physician. We have 1.5 positions for that, and we have nurses that are screening 24 hours a day. So we have those resources. But when somebody comes in crisis, it can take up to 24 hours to get that person seen. And with the new flagging system, that will speed that up. But let me just mention something, and I think this was also has been an oversight on many people's part, even though it's been pretty prevalent out there, the information. I know that the officers, they do a checklist about whether or not this person is involved in experiencing any mental health crisis or anything like that, and they check a box, and they use that paperwork for the intake officer to then enter the information into the computer system. When that information is entered, the following day, because this was late at night, the following day, the medical professionals will come in and look and see who might need their attention, and it could take up to 24 hours to get that. Even though that officer inadvertently checked the no box that there were no mental health issues, the officers in the intake still had the wherewithal and the presence of mind to put in a request for mental health to see this guy the next day because something wasn't right. So that system did not fail. We've just made it a little bit better.
Now, when I interviewed Miss Amy for Quintin's Close-Ups on June 2nd, she basically said, hey, her son wasn't combative. He wasn't involved in the fight. Do we actually know what happened to the persons who were involved in this alleged fight at the medical facility?
No, I agree with her 100%. When I looked at the video, I think that there was a scuffle prior to the police getting there. But at the moment that the police got there, that was done. That scuffle was over. The decision to arrest Mr. Sutherland was because the medical professional at the facility wanted to press charges. Even though the officer said everything's, you could hear him saying, are you sure everything's calm now? They said, no, we want him out. So that puts the police in a really bad spot. But he wasn't combative. He didn't fight them. When you saw him come into the detention facility and he was in a heightened state, he wasn't talking to the officers. He was talking to the person that came in before him that he was fighting with. And he was in a room off to the, almost behind where you saw the body cam, and he was yelling at somebody. He was yelling at that person. He wasn't yelling at officers. And he was talking about the Illuminati. He had become agitated again because he was brought into a situation where the person he was fighting with was also arrested and was in that same room. It was closed off by glass, but you can't hear that because the other person is behind this glass, but Jamal sees him, and that's when that interaction began. You notice as they walk him down the hall, though, that stopped, and he was cooperating, with officers when he was placed in isolation, and at some point he must have cooperated because he changed clothes.
Why couldn't have, I believe it was North Charleston Police, if I'm not mistaken, obviously transported him to the detention center. Why didn't they just take him to a hospital, mental hospital?
Again, Quinn, we can Monday morning quarterback all day long. I know what our protocols and our policies would have dictated. I don't know what theirs call for, and I think I think they're in a tough spot when you have somebody saying, "I want to press charges." And obviously, the police are recognizing that there's a reason he's in that facility and that he's agitated. You're putting decisions on the police that they shouldn't be making. And I don't know that there would have been a right answer for that. Ideally, we all would say, he should have gone there, but really we don't know, what the right answer was at that point. I think there were options available, and they did what they felt was right based on, having a victim wanting to press charges. And I think that's just very unfortunate. Now, we have been in that situation since then, our agency, where criminal charges were requested, and the officers said, okay, great, I'll get him away from here. I'll go get warrants. You can pursue it, but I'm taking him to a hospital. So that's what we've done, and that's what our folks continue to do on a daily basis. It's unbelievable the amount of calls that we get involving mental health, and our people are doing great work, and we get a bad rap because of one tragic event that was really preventable.
Why are there no law enforcement officers with mental health backgrounds?
I don't know that that's true, Quintin. I mean, I don't know everyone's background, but I think we do have law enforcement officers who have been counselors, they've been teachers. But I mean, that's not a requirement if that's what you're asking. It's not a requirement that you do, but we do have mental health embedded in law enforcement. We have them at most recently at 911. I know you talked to Eric Watson, and they have a mental health person in 911. That has proven to be a tremendous success. And we also have, a mental health person embedded here in the agency. We keep her busy. It's just one person. I mean, we keep her busy, but we can do better. We will do better. And that's the purpose of tomorrow's summit, is to look at ways that we can improve our services, because ultimately, the more people we divert in a mental health crisis, and divert from our detention center and take them to places that they need to be, then it's a win for the community, in my view. And we want to get these people the help they need. We don't want to stick them away in a facility and say, "Here's your medication. I'll come see you when I have time because I have 299 other patients to see." That's not fair. Our largest mental health provider in Charleston County is the detention center. I have over 300 people on medication and or under a doctor's care. The state hospital, Quintin, has only 200 beds open right now. And we have more people in our detention center than the state hospital. That is a problem, and that's what the purpose of tomorrow's summit is to help resolve these problems with the lawmakers and legislators and county council and the people that make the decisions on our funding. It's time for them to now put their work into action.
I didn't know you watched the interview with Eric. But you said on May 14th in a press conference to quote, trust the process. But have you looked, Sheriff, at what the process has actually produced?
Yeah, so Quintin, I didn't make up the process. Okay, Eric Watson was a part of that process, so he understands it. So I didn't make the process. It's what I inherited. I don't have to agree with it. Okay, not that I have, but I had to respect it at that time. It's okay not to agree with it, but to respect the process. Now, have we asked for changes in that process? Absolutely, we have. We've sat down with all the local sheriffs and chiefs of police and Solicitor Wilson. We've talked about that collectively, about what we want that process to look like, because we feel we need to have a little more control over our own investigations, despite them going to another entity, especially when it comes to control over when to release what. And so she has agreed to change that process. And so that's all I was asking for. Patience, don't jump the gun. I haven't come out and started pointing fingers because something doesn't look good and I'm going to point fingers at the people that messed it up. The process was there for a reason. It was put in place to make this a more smooth transition when it comes to prosecution and investigation, and to make it as fair and equitable as possible. But there's just a lack of trust in law enforcement across the country. So I can't just say, trust the process. Even though I don't exactly trust it, I have to respect it and work towards those changes, and that's what we're doing.
Do you think the community trusts you today?
I hope so. I think what the community has seen and the cards and letters and the phone calls I get every day is, Quintin, I think you're forgetting that this is what I inherited. I'm not sweeping it under the rug. I'm not pointing fingers and saying it's somebody else's fault. What I'm saying is we have problems in the system and we're fixing them. And that's what I'm doing. And if they think that the last 30 years of what was in place was going to fix a process that was already bad, then they have another thought coming. I think the county got it right. I think our citizens got it right. And I get those calls every day reiterating that.
As a matter of fact, former Charleston County Sheriff Cannon, who actually canceled on me twice for Quintin's close-ups last week, said, quote, if we had a problem with an inmate in a cell, its supervisor would approach the cell and advise that person would need to come out without any violence. They would be told that if they didn't come out peacefully, they would send in a tactical team to restrain them and take them out of the cell. Was that the actual approach for Jamal?
I don't think that was the protocol that they used. I mean, I think that was probably what he understood it to be. In fact, there was an officer prior to those two individuals going in and actually trying to force him out that had talked to him for some time, trying to bring him down. And it appeared at some point to be working. But, we had some missed opportunities, Quintin. We had opportunities where Mr. Sutherland was saying, what is it that you want? What do you want from? And nobody bothered to engage and inform and talk and to work through this. And that was a failure. That was a failure on our part. And and I think that's the unfortunate part. No, we don't just go in and rip people out of a cell. I know that was the training that they had, but they actually did take their time before all that to try to de-escalate. And I don't know what, I still can't wrap my brain around what that sense of urgency was. And I don't know that I'll ever understand and I'll ever get those answers. But for me, time is on our side. When we have something like that, he's not hurting anybody. He's not hurting himself. He's just refusing to do something. Time is on our side. Eventually, he'll want to get out and go talk to somebody. And we had every chance to stop doing what we did.
Do you think the deputies were using bond court procedure, or were they actually using use of force procedure?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination. The bond court procedure was a procedure that was a directive. It was, they were told by former Chief Beatty that this had to happen. That was their directive. They've been operating out of that under that directive since 2017, and this was to them routine every day. This is what they did. And when somebody refused, they went into a mode where they were going to make them refuse in front of a judge. I don't know a judge today. I've never met one that would say, I don't care what condition they're in, I want to see them in front of me right now. I think that's bull. I think that that was an interpretation, and that was the interpretation that these officers were told, that procedurally, and that's something that they've been doing for years. I don't know a judge that would do that. I think we have fantastic judges in this town. They use really good judgment, and I've never seen one, despite somebody's health condition or mental condition, say, no, I demand to see him right here. I don't believe that. I don't believe that's even, to me, it's not even believable.
And I use it. And I was just looking back at the interview you did with Channel 2 just earlier this morning before I came out here. But I know Chief Deputy Beatty was relieved the day before, and you said he was relieved at noon the day that apparently Mr. Sutherland died, if I'm not mistaken. When was it arranged that he would be actually relieved?
Months earlier. I mean, I was not, like, and first of all, that's a lie. He was not relieved the day before. He was relieved that morning. He came into work that morning at 8:09, and he was escorted out of the building a short time afterwards. He left by 12:15, 12:30 that afternoon. Happy to send you the video that shows that date and time stamp. But yeah, I don't appreciate the whole. I wasn't in charge. No, you were the problem, and that was why. That I said that accountability needs to go to it's even beyond that. It needs to go to a higher level, and I truly believe that he was instrumental in keeping this third party in their training, knowing that these tactics were dangerous, knowing that they weren't certifiable tactics, that were practices that that were part of any standard that we know. I was infuriated by it. I couldn't believe it. And when you look at the videos that we found, to put our own people through what we put our own people through for the sake of being on this elite team who is poorly trained, I think is insensitive. It's insincere, and Mr. Beatty has no credibility with me.
Prior to him actually being relieved, was he actually under investigation for allowing this that could just continue to go on since 2017?
So I will tell you there are at least three. There were at least three investigations prior to this internally that were specifically he was named in them, dealing with Mr. Garcia. But those never went anywhere. Those are just the ones I'm aware of.
Well, okay, and let me ask you, who did the investigation as far as training within the detention center after the Jamal Sutherland's death?
I couldn't hear you, Quintin.
Oh, I'm so sorry, but outside, who actually investigated? Who did you all investigate as far as training within the detention center after the death of Jamal Sutherland?
So again, I'm going to go back to when I was in transition. Joseph Garcia and this company that he ran, or the shell company that he ran, was under my radar many months earlier. But when I was in transition, it was the only focus that I could think of that was really something that we needed to get our fingers on as quickly as possible. So it began the day after the election. That not just me, my investigation. I had been investigating, and I had been checking into stuff. Back in September, the Post and Courier did an article about the Inmate Welfare Fund. And by the way, all of that training was paid for through the Inmate Welfare Fund. It was over $300,000 that was paid for through the Inmate Welfare Fund, which is supposed to benefit the inmates. You can't tell me, the prior administration, everybody's been defending that it was for the best interest of the residents or the inmates. I disagree with that. I think that was abused. I think it was an excuse, and because there was no way that county council would have approved that kind of training funds for somebody who doesn't even have certifications. So those investigations into Mr. Garcia, in connection with Beatty, started well before the transition. So we already knew that was a problem. So I had already made my decision. Quintin, I didn't have the authority to do anything until I got in there. It's not like I didn't know. It's just I didn't have the ability to do anything until I was able to sign something and say this is what we're going to do. And I made that decision pretty fast. It was pretty abrupt. Unfortunately, it wasn't quick enough.
Now, Mr. Beatty apparently said that you all took some items from his office. Where do we stand with that right now?
I don't know what he's referring to.
Okay.
I think he might have taken some items from his own office, but I'm not aware of what he's talking about.
Now, you said that your detention deputies, that is, have never done true de-escalation training over the past several years, and that they only watched some videos, apparently. Now, according to Channel 4, those officials will be undergoing interactive de-escalation training for the first time. So is video training promulgated by the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy now considered true training, or no?
Yes, so there's two different types. The type of training that the academy often does refresher courses, and those can be done by video. Okay. But true de-escalation training it's really hard to do it well and be effective without it being in person. We work with NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, and they provide the CIT training to the agency. I've been through it a couple times. It's invaluable to me. The detention center as a whole has not been invited to those trainings, but it is mandated now going forward that they all complete NAMI training. The difficulty, though, is, I will tell you, just this week in the scheduling, it's been difficult because NAMI requires at least 15 people to sign up before they will even come in and train. And when I can only allow 6 or 7 or 8 based on staffing in there, we now have to reach to other agencies and open it up and say, hey, would you all be interested in this? Because our folks have already been through it, but we're opening it up now because we cannot allow that to be delayed any longer. We've just got to get this in there. It makes everybody safer. It gives them the tools they need to be effective, especially in that setting. It talks about de-escalation. It practices de-escalation. There's role playing. And honestly, Quintin, I've used it in the field, and it's been incredibly effective for me personally. And I've seen it with our troops using it daily.
What is the staffing level right now at the Charleston County Detention Center?
Yeah, well, so we were 100 and I want to say over 100 bodies short. It was 104, but I think it was actually a little more than that when I came in. During the budget, process, the county removed 40 of those positions from me, so that brought it down to 60 positions short. I need at least 50 now to be safe. Staffing wise, I need to have 50 people in there so that we can create a safer environment that's manageable, because our numbers are going up. People are going back to work. We're making arrests. It's life is coming back. Aside from this latest COVID, epidemic that we're going through, people are out and about now, and so we need. And we've been vigorously pursuing getting folks in. Our goal is 5 a month into the detention center. I just swore 5 or 6 in this morning, not detention. They were all law side. We were also 20 plus bodies short on the law side. We're now full, and we have a pool of applicants. I think we just went through the last one on the pool, so everybody's been hired, and we're starting another pool. So the law side is looking good. The detention side, we need people. And please go to ccsojobs.com if you're interested in working.
And how much money would you ask as far as funding from Charleston County Council?
I think, look, council did what they thought was reasonable because those positions were unfunded. Problem is, we have so many people working overtime that it eats away at your budget at a quicker pace. So we can offset that by hiring and getting people in here. But it takes time, Quintin. It doesn't happen overnight. There's a series of process they need to go through. We've changed the process somewhat to streamline it, but there's only so much we can do because we're bound by academy standards to provide that. So we're doing the best we can. I've got two recruiters full time working on that. On the detention side, I have a law recruiter that is helping, but she was just promoted, so she's doing double duty. So she's also doing community events and kind of overseeing the recruiting. But we're out in the community every day, and we're doing everything we can to put it out there that we do have positions available. If you want to be a part of the solution, come join us. But we've got a lot of work to do, Quintin. I'm extremely proud of the professionals that I have at that detention center who give day in and day out every bit of themselves at the sacrifice of their own families to make sure that their residents stay safe. And that is their goal. And I don't think that can be overlooked.
Now, obviously, we heard about the decision that Scarlett Wilson made last week, and you said, hey, you didn't see any malice, anything like that. Does that mean now that those 2 detention officers will be rehired?
Not by me. I mean, I'm sure that if they choose to stay in this line of work, they can certainly apply. They have to go through the same process anyone else would, but not by me.
And how did their training at the detention center contradict procedure within the Charleston County Sheriff's Office?
Not just procedure, policy. So the policy is driven more towards de-escalating things, and their procedure, their training was escalating. It was fear. It was intimidation. That's what they did, and that's what that group was set up to do. Not that they all did it, because Mr. Huell himself, just days before, had a similar incident and said to his boss, I don't want to do this. We could just delay the bond hearing, and took it upon himself to get that bond hearing delayed, and it was fine. We didn't have any issues. So they do have the ability to do that, and those guys were starting to make those decisions, but they didn't, and I had even met with every one of these folks prior to me being sworn in to say, this is a problem. I specifically spelled out that team. The training that you have is a problem. I don't want you to think that you're the problem. The training you have was the problem, and we're going to fix it. Bear with me. Again, Quintin, I didn't have the time in 3 hours in the door to get in there and fix it.
How then, Sheriff, how do you actually protect those deputies if they don't want to perform duties that are illegal, unethical, or inhumane?
Well, I love that you asked that. In fact, the first policy that I had already written just for that, prior to being sworn in, I'd already written it was a duty to intervene, and that they must intervene when they see something that was wrong or they thought it was going in the wrong direction. So that policy was already written. It was just going through the accreditation process to sign off on it, and it was in place shortly thereafter. That protects them from getting in trouble for not doing what they're told to do if they think that was an immoral, illegal, or unethical order that they received. That protects them. They're not in trouble for it if they do the right thing.
Now, I know Scarlett Wilson said she based her decision on the law, and you said to Channel 2, I based my decision on policy and procedure. Let me ask you, when it came to releasing the tape, did you base your decision on the law, or did you base your decision on policy and procedure?
So there's no policy and procedure that tells me when I can release something. There is a law that says I don't have to. I don't have to release body cam. That's not something I'm mandated to do. I based my decision on the process that was in place, the officer involved critical incident process that's spelled out. You saw it in Solicitor Wilson's report. I did exactly what that procedure said to do. I communicated with her when I was going to release it. I communicated with her with my intentions of when I was going to release it. And I communicated that with the attorney of the family to make sure they were ready for it to be released. So this was not something that I wanted to do it sooner, but then I'm bound by this protocol, and all of the law enforcement has agreed to this protocol. They all agreed to it. So I wasn't a part of that agreement. Unfortunately, it was done before me, but I had to respect that process. That's what I did. I followed it, what I believe to a T, and I released it when I was able to release it.
Why isn't former Sheriff Cannon getting equal blame?
Quintin, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I would just tell you that I honestly don't believe he understood what was being taught over there. If he did, he wouldn't have defended it. I heard in Scarlett Wilson's report, it might have been the Rainey report, they referred to it as militaristic training. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think it was more prisoner of war training. I think it was sadistic. It was wrong. Sheriff Cannon knew he's a military guy. There's no way he would not have approved it if he'd seen it, if he was really aware of it.
And let me ask you this: will your deputies conduct a threat assessment so as not to precipitate any unnecessary, unreasonable, or disappropriate use of force by placing themselves or others in undue jeopardy?
We do threat assessments every day. Every interaction we have with people, we do threat assessments. Our deputies do it on the street. Our detention people do it in the detention center. If members of the ERT emergency response team are called in, they're embedded throughout the agency. There's only I would say 10 of them. If they're needed and their expertise is needed, they know that they can go straight to de-escalation, and that's what they do. The only time we're going to go hands-on, Quintin, anymore is when it's absolutely necessary. If melee breaks out and trays are being thrown and there's a huge fight, we're going to do what we have to do to dispense that. But also, if somebody's trying to hurt themselves or others, we have to act. And that at those moments, they're making split decisions, and they'll do whatever they are trained to do. Luckily, they're getting skill-based training now that is in concert with principles and practices in our policy and also with the academy. So, there's less fear of them going in and actually acting now when they know that if they do the right thing, they're going to be protected.
And let me get back to the detention center quickly. How many tablets are in the cells for inmates or residents who want to do virtual bond hearings?
So we have access to several of them. I don't think they only do one bond hearing at a time, but there may be 2 or 3, but they only do one bond hearing at a time. So that tablet is always available if needed. There's been criticism. Well, they always had the ability to do virtual bond hearings. Well, that's true. They did. It was on the other side of the jail. It was in a room that was wired for it. So we would still have to remove them from that cell or that room and bring them to the room where the bond hearings are done. So yes, it's always been available to them. It just wasn't, it was on the other side of the jail. So they still have to get them from point A to point B. The difference now is we don't have to move them if we don't want to. So if they go to an individual cell or a room and they just flat out said, I'm not going to cooperate, we can bring the tablet to them and say, okay, tell it to the judge or we'll just reschedule you. And eventually, Quintin, they want to come out. So eventually they want to get out and they calm down, and it may be a lot of reasons why they're heightened. They're angry about, why they're there. Maybe they've got mental health issues. Maybe they're just on medication. They need medication. They just haven't had their medication. Maybe they're coming off of drugs, from a high, and now they're coming back down to earth. And so there are a lot of reasons that we shouldn't move them. There's more reasons that we shouldn't move them for safety reasons than when we actually do move them.
Now, during your entire internal investigation, did you all consider hiring a taser expert?
No, we got the taser downloads from Axon, the provider, and I think that gave a very thorough breakdown of what tasers, what happened during the tasing, which ones were effective. No, we didn't need a taser expert for that. The data shows what was effective, what wasn't. I don't. It wasn't the tasing that was really the most concerning. It was the lack of communication when both started doing the same thing and just kept escalating. In my view, Huell's. I'm going by what I remember. Huell's taser, all three tasers were good. Out of Fickett's 7 polls, only 1 was good. So they were. I think every taser is effective. I've been hit by them a couple times, so even if I don't get jolted and my muscles don't seize up, it still pisses me off. And that's what it does. It makes you angry, and you get heightened even more. And I think that the lack of training in that respect, the lack of consistency, the lack of communication, all contributed to that.
Since Scarlett Wilson has made her decision, and obviously you all have made your internal investigation, what has been the communication like between you and Ms. Amy?
Me and who?
Amy Sutherland, I'm sorry.
There hasn't been any communication. I've spoken to her and Mr. James twice on the phone since this incident, right the day before Jamal's funeral and the day after the incident. And, people spin things up and think, there's just bad blood. She's angry. She's upset. She has every right to be. I wear a uniform that represents her son being killed. So there's absolutely, nothing I can do to change the events that happened that day. And I take full responsibility for what the things I can change. One of the conversations we had were tense. It was heartbreaking. I would never want to be in her shoes. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. I wouldn't want to be in that family's shoes. But I think it's important for us now to move forward, and my promise to her would be I will not let Jamal's death be in vain. And I will do whatever I can to make sure no family has to go through what this family has had to go through.
And last question for you, Sheriff. At what point was there any serious medical intervention, which is mandatory for mental health patients in need of medication?
So you're talking about during the incident or after he came in?
After he came in.
After he came in. So again, what I'm going to tell you is he was brought to us from a hospital. We have no idea at that point, because there were no records to indicate what he had been given at that hospital. So we have no indication at that point to know what he's already had, what he needs. He told us. Jamal told us they had given him several shots. I'm not sure what those shots were. I'm not a physician. I'm not going to pretend to know. But again, he was only with us 12 hours. And so he had already, in my view, based on watching what we had already decompensated mentally when he walked in those doors. Yeah, he wasn't arguing with us. He was arguing with the guy in the cell, but he was saying things that, to me, would make me, as a reasonable person, think he needs help, he needs medication. And, by all indications, he said he had gotten too many shots, but we don't know. We can't verify that information. The only way to do that is to get an evaluation done. Once the bond hearing's done, the medical professional would come and meet with them and try to discuss, what those medications were. But the bond hearing was never done. And many times, Quintin, they leave the facility before a medical professional could even get to them. Because remember, it was a delay. It was up to 24 hours. A lot of folks don't stay with us 24 hours. There was every indication that Mr. Sutherland would have been released in a very short period of time. So it is very likely, highly likely, that he would have never been seen under that system.
What precautions were taken to put him in an isolated cell?
Yeah, so the fact that he wasn't put in general population with because it's open bay setting. We have a behavioral health unit. We have a special unit that we put people in who have mental health issues and or substance abuse issues, who need additional care. And he was put in the behavioral unit because there were no beds available in the other one. That doesn't mean he's not getting less care. He actually did very well all night. He cooperated, like I said. He had changed at some point, changed clothes. So it wasn't like he was being neglected. He just didn't want to come out. Or to me, it sounded like he just wanted more answers. Why do you want me to come out? What is it that you want from me? And we just didn't communicate that to him. So there's no indication that he wasn't getting the treatment or care that he needed. It's just that our interaction became heightened with him once we got to that point where he was going to be removed.
Charleston County Sheriff Kristin Graziano, thank you for your time. And again, welcome back to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you so much, Quintin. You have a great day.
Thank you.